Here's what we're going to find out today. What was really behind that strange little door built into the outside wall of so many old homes? Why did some houses have a tiny window above every single door? What was kept down in the basement that left the walls stained black for good? And why did so many families have one room in the house that almost nobody was ever allowed to sit in? Let's start with the one thing every home absolutely needed, long before electricity ever touched a kitchen. Before the electric refrigerator, there was the icebox, a wooden cabinet lined inside with tin or zinc, packed between the walls with cork or sawdust to keep the cold in. A block of ice sat in a compartment at the top, and the cold air simply settled downward, the way cold always does, keeping the food below it fresh. Here's the part most people forget, that ice didn't come from a freezer. It came from the iceman, who drove his wagon door to door, hauling blocks with iron tongs, refilling that compartment before the old block melted away. A family in 1925 paid around 60 cents a week for regular ice delivery. Not nothing, but worth every penny when the alternative was spoiled milk and wasted meat. The icebox sat in nearly every American kitchen for decades, right up until the 1930s and 40s, when electric refrigeration finally became affordable for ordinary families. Nobody waits on the iceman's wagon anymore. That daily wait just disappeared. Look up sometime, next time you're in an old house. Above many doors, there's a small window, usually rectangular, sometimes hinged, so it can swing open on its own. That's a transom window, and before air conditioning, before central heating even existed in most homes, it did real work. Open it, and air could move freely from room to room without anyone having to leave a door wide open and lose all their privacy. Closed, it still let light spill in from the hallway, even into a windowless room. Opening one wasn't always so simple either. People used a long pole called a transom operator, hooked onto a little lever to crank the window open from down on the floor. It's a small detail, easy to walk right past today. But it solved a problem we don't even think about anymore, because a switch on the wall solves it for us now. Every respectable home in the 1800s and well into the early 1900s had a parlor, and the parlor was never for everyday life. It was the best room in the house, the good furniture, the good rug, sometimes a piano nobody touched except on Sundays, and it stayed closed up most of the week, waiting for company, waiting for a wedding, a christening, sometimes even a funeral, because in many homes the parlor was where the casket was set out before burial. That's part of why, by the early 20th century, some people quietly stopped calling it the parlor at all, and started calling it something darker instead. Here's the thing nobody really talks about. The room itself never disappeared. It just changed its name and its purpose. As televisions moved into homes and entertaining became less formal, that closed-off best room slowly became what we now just call the living room. Open every day, used by everyone, nothing too precious about it at all. In the largest houses, there were rooms built for people who weren't family, but who lived there all the same. Servants' quarters, tucked into a basement or an attic in a smaller home, or set off in their own separate wing in a grander one. The arrangement was deliberate, close enough to be useful at a moment's notice, far enough to stay out of sight the rest of the time. Walk through a preserved servants' wing today, and it tells you almost everything about how unevenly American life used to be lived. The plain, narrow stairs the staff used, tucked away from the wide staircase the family walked down every morning. Those quarters thinned out and mostly disappeared through the early 20th century as fewer households could afford live-in help, and the whole shape of family life shifted toward people doing their own housework. Before a single home had running water, there was the washstand, a small wooden table, often mahogany or walnut if the family could afford it, built to hold exactly one basin and one pitcher. Every morning, and again before bed, that pitcher got filled, the basin got used, and the day began and ended with cold water and a washcloth. It sounds like such a small thing now, But it was the entire bathroom for most of the 19th century. The washstand didn't survive the plumbing boom of the early 1900s. Once a sink with a working tap showed up down the hall, that little table with its basin and pitcher simply had no job left to do. Some families kept theirs anyway, turned into a side table, the pitcher left there now just for decoration. Down in the basement of a great many Victorian homes, there's a small hinged door built right into the foundation wall, leading to a metal chute angled down into the dark. That's a coal chute, and once a week or so, a coal truck would back right up to the house and send an entire delivery sliding down into a special room beside the furnace. Here's something almost nobody knows. In homes without a built-in chute, the coal still had to get inside somehow, and that job fell to workers everyone called lumpers, men who carried coal in by the wheelbarrow or by the sackful, one heavy load at a time. Wealthier homes eventually installed something called a Riley stoker, a mechanical feeder that moved coal straight from a hopper into the furnace, with no shoveling required at all. Even now, decades after the last delivery, the walls of those old coal rooms are still stained black. That stain never really washes out. It's the one thing the coal chute left behind that no renovation ever quite erases. Behind the walls and up in the ceilings of homes built between the 1880s and the 1930s, there's a wiring method most homeowners today have never even heard of: knob and tube. Single copper wires, each one wrapped in its own insulation, run through small porcelain tubes and held in place by porcelain knobs, keeping the live wire from ever touching the wood framing around it. It was cheap to install, and for its time, it did the job well enough. But it had no grounding wire at all, and decades of settling, drilling, and renovation left old knob and tube far more vulnerable than anyone realized when it first went in. By the time electrical demand in homes climbed, more lights, more outlets, eventually appliances nobody in 1900 could have dreamed up, knob and tube simply couldn't keep up. Most of it has since been pulled out and replaced. Reliable beat exciting. Grounded modern wiring beat porcelain knobs in a wall every time. Built right into the outer wall of so many older homes and apartment buildings is a small insulated door, often no bigger than a bread box, a milk door. The milkman opened it from outside each morning, set down the day's bottles, and closed it again. The family on the other side simply opened their own small door from inside the kitchen and brought the milk straight in. No going outside. No worrying about a stray dog or a passing thief getting to the bottles first. It was such a small piece of hardware, and it quietly solved a problem that barely exists anymore, because almost nobody gets milk delivered to their door at all now. The refrigerator made the milkman optional. The supermarket finished the job. The milk door stayed behind in the wall of plenty of houses, painted over, sealed shut, doing nothing at all. Between the kitchen and the formal dining room of a large 19th or early 20th century home, there was often a separate room with one very specific purpose: the butler's pantry. This wasn't just storage. It held the silverware, the good china, the serving platters that only came out for company, and it was where a household's most valuable everyday items got counted, cleaned, and prepared before they ever reached the table. Here's something nobody really talks about. In some homes, the butler actually slept in that pantry, on a cot tucked among the cabinets, just to keep the silver safe overnight. The room never fully disappeared. It just got smaller and more practical, and today, the houses that still have one mostly use it as a staging area for big dinners, a place to keep the good dishes that don't quite fit in the regular kitchen cabinets. In multi-story homes built before household help became harder to find, there was sometimes a small elevator built specifically for food and laundry, never for people. That's a dumbwaiter, and the design goes back to a patent from inventor George W. Cannon in the late 19th century. Before electric motors got added in the 1920s, every single dumbwaiter ran on nothing but rope and pulleys, hand-pulled between floors, carrying maybe a couple £100 at most. A tray of food could travel from the kitchen up to the dining room, without a single servant climbing a flight of stairs while balancing a full plate. Some still survive today, mostly in old homes converted into restaurants, or in schools moving supplies between floors. A small mechanical idea that turned out to be useful enough to outlast almost everything else on this list. And finally, running along the wall near the ceiling in so many homes built in the 19th and early 20th centuries, picture rails, just a simple strip of molding, and from it, a hook and a length of wire held every framed picture in the house, hanging at just the right height. The whole point was what it avoided: not a single nail hole in the plaster, no permanent damage every time someone wanted to rearrange a wall of photographs. It let a family redecorate as often as they liked without leaving a mark behind. As plaster gave way to drywall and a small nail hole stopped being a big deal, picture rails simply stopped being necessary. The molding is still there in plenty of old houses today. Most people living there now have no idea what it was ever for. Here's the bigger thing underneath all of it. Every one of these features existed because a house used to demand constant, hands-on attention just to keep running. Ice replaced by hand, coal shoveled by hand, water carried by hand, pictures hung without a single nail because plaster simply couldn't take the damage. None of it was decoration. Every feature on this list was somebody's solution to a problem that doesn't even exist for us anymore. And they built that solution right into the walls of their own home, because there was no other way to solve it. Next time you're in an old house, your grandparents' place, a historic home, anywhere built before the war, look up near a doorway. Look down at the foundation wall in the basement. Look for a small door built into the kitchen wall that doesn't seem to lead anywhere. You'll probably find at least one of these, and now you'll know exactly what it was for. Memory Lane, America. One story at a time.